human lifted the fallen alien girl from the river, and was chosen to stand trial in her place. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. Michael Turner stood by the riverbank, his breath sharp in the cold air. His boots sank into the wet soil as he looked down at the alien girl he had just pulled from the rushing waters. She was barely conscious, her body limp in his arms. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent glow, a stark contrast to the dark, muddy water that had nearly claimed her life. The moment Michael had seen her struggling against the current, he didn't hesitate. He had no idea who she was or why she was out here alone, but when someone needed help, he stepped in. The girl's face was pale, her silvery eyes fluttering open as she gasped for breath. She blinked, her confusion evident. He could feel her tremble against him, but there was something else, something powerful in her gaze. She wasn't afraid, not in the way a normal person would be. There was something ancient in the way she looked at him, like she was measuring him, assessing him. Michael's arms were sore from the strain of pulling her from the water, but he couldn't bring himself to put her down. He felt a responsibility now, as though the weight of her life rested in his hands. She wasn't just another face in the crowd, she was someone who had a story, a purpose. "Hey, you're all right now," he said, trying to calm her, though his voice was rough with the cold air. The girl's lips parted, and though she was still gasping for air, she managed to whisper something unintelligible. Michael gently set her down on the wet ground, trying to shield her from the worst of the cold. Her clothes were torn, drenched, and clung to her body like a second skin. He didn't know what kind of alien she was, but she was far from ordinary. Her hair, silvery and shimmering like a cloud in the moonlight, caught the light and made her look ethereal. For a moment, Michael just watched her, unsure of what to do next. The girl struggled to sit up, her hands gripping the muddy earth as if to steady herself. She looked up at him again, her eyes full of something he couldn't place. Gratitude? Recognition? He couldn't be sure. It wasn't long before the air around them shifted. Footsteps echoed in the distance, heavy and deliberate. The alien girl seemed to tense, her gaze darting toward the sound, but she didn't move, not yet. Michael didn't need to look to know that trouble was coming. He had seen enough in his life to recognize the signs. Whoever this girl was, whoever was coming for her, it wasn't good. "Stay behind me," he ordered, stepping in front of her instinctively. But the girl shook her head, as if she had already accepted her fate. "No," she said, her voice stronger now, though still laced with an alien accent. I am the one who is meant to face judgment." Michael frowned. Judgment? What the hell was going on? Before he could ask her to explain, a group of figures emerged from the trees at the far side of the river. They were tall, their features sharp and angular, their skin a deep shade of blue. Their eyes were cold, their expressions unreadable. They approached slowly, deliberately, as if the situation were already decided. Michael didn't flinch, though his hand hovered near his sidearm. He wasn't sure who these people were, but he had learned long ago not to trust appearances. The leader, a tall figure with a flowing robe and an air of command, spoke in a language Michael didn't understand. But the alien girl, who had been quiet until now, responded in the same language. Her voice was steady, though Michael could hear the tension in her tone. "I accept the trial," she said, her words firm. The leader nodded, turning his gaze toward Michael. "And the human?" he asked. The girl's eyes flickered toward Michael, and for the first time, a faint hint of uncertainty crossed her face. "The human will take my place," she said, her voice low but unwavering. Michael's mind raced. Take her place? What did that mean? Before he could ask more questions, the leader turned to his companions and gestured toward Michael. The world around them seemed to hold its breath as the decision was made. And just like that, Michael Turner found himself caught in something far bigger than he ever could have imagined. He wasn't just a bystander anymore. He was part of something much more dangerous, much more complicated. And whether he liked it or not, he would have to face whatever came next. Michael stood frozen as the alien group approached, the air heavy with tension. His hand instinctively moved to his sidearm, but he knew better than to draw it. This was a diplomatic situation, and pulling a weapon could make things worse. The leader of the group, a tall alien with skin that shimmered like polished sapphire, stepped forward. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and cold. Michael could feel the weight of his gaze, sizing him up, as if the leader were deciding something important. The alien leader spoke in a language Michael didn't understand, the words flowing with an eerie melody that didn't quite belong in his world. The girl, Talia, spoke in response, her voice steady and clear. She had accepted the trial, whatever that meant. Michael glanced at her, but her expression was unreadable. She didn't seem scared, but rather resigned. She knew this was coming. The leader turned his gaze back to Michael, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, as if reaching a decision, the leader spoke again, this time in English, though with a strange accent. The human will stand trial in her place. Michael's chest tightened. What do you mean, trial? He asked, his voice more forceful than he intended. The alien leader raised a hand, signaling for calm. It is not your choice, he said, his voice low and powerful. The decision has been made. You must face judgment for your actions. Michael's mind raced. What did they want from him? Was this some sort of test? He had simply helped someone in need. He wasn't prepared for this. Talia, still sitting on the ground, looked up at him, her eyes softening for the first time since Michael had pulled her from the river. You don't have to do this, she said quietly, though there was a tinge of regret in her voice. It is my burden to carry, not yours. Michael shook his head. I didn't save you just to let you face this alone, he replied. I don't care what the rules are. I'm not backing down. The leader of the alien group watched the exchange in silence, his face impassive. Then, after a long pause, he spoke again. Very well, he said. You will face the trial. If you survive, you will be free to leave. But if you fail, his words trailed off, but the implication was clear. Failure would mean something far worse. Michael's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to make sense of the situation. He wasn't a fighter, not in the way these aliens probably were. He was just a regular guy trying to do the right thing. But something in the leader's eyes made him realize that his choices were limited. The alien girl, Talia, stood slowly, her legs shaky from the ordeal, but her resolve was clear. The trial is our way, she said, her voice firm despite her weakened state. We must abide by it, or there will be no peace. Michael nodded, though the weight of the decision hung heavy on him. He didn't understand all the customs or the stakes of the trial, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to back down. Whatever it took, he would face whatever came next, for her, and for the chance to make things right. As they were led away toward a waiting transport, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. He had no idea what kind of trial awaited him, but he wasn't about to let fear decide his fate. The alien leader and his group didn't speak again, but Michael could feel their eyes on him, assessing, evaluating. It was clear that his every move would be scrutinized from now on. As they traveled, the silence stretched between them, and Michael couldn't help but wonder what he had gotten himself into. He wasn't the hero type. He was just a man who had tried to help someone in need. But as the alien transport rumbled beneath them, he knew one thing for sure, this wasn't just about saving one life anymore. It was about something much greater, something he couldn't yet understand. And he was going to have to face it, whether he was ready or not. As the transport hummed softly beneath them, Michael sat still, his mind racing with thoughts he could barely process. Talia sat across from him, her gaze steady, though her body was still clearly recovering from the river's cold grip. The silence between them was thick, the weight of what was to come pressing down on both of them. Michael kept his eyes ahead, staring out of the small window, but the view did little to calm his nerves. The sky outside was darkening, the stars twinkling faintly as they sped toward an unknown destination. Every minute felt like an eternity. The transport was unlike anything Michael had ever seen. Its smooth, almost fluid shape reflected the soft light from the console in front of him. Alien technology, so far beyond anything humanity had achieved, surrounded him. Yet, it was not the technology that consumed his thoughts, it was the trial, the unknown judgment that he had agreed to face in Talia's place. He wasn't a warrior, wasn't someone who could hold his ground in a courtroom or face an alien tribunal. He was just a man who had tried to do the right thing. "You don't have to do this," Talia's voice broke through the silence, soft but resolute. Michael turned to look at her, her eyes meeting his. "I told you before, I won't leave you to face this alone," he said, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts in his mind. "It's my choice." Talia nodded slowly, her silver eyes flickering with something Michael couldn't quite place. She had been quiet for a while, but now, her words felt heavier, as if the weight of her decisions were finally catching up to her. "I don't know what kind of trial awaits you," she said softly, almost to herself. "But I do know it is not easy. For my people, a trial is not just a judgment, it is a test of your soul, of who you are at your core." Michael frowned, trying to make sense of her words. "A test of my soul," he repeated. Talia nodded. "Yes. It's not just about what you've done, or whether you followed the rules. It's about proving that you are worthy of the life you've been given. The trial will look at you, at who you really are, deep inside." Michael let out a breath, his mind struggling to grasp the full meaning of her words. "I'm just a guy who did the right thing," he said quietly. "I don't know what you're talking about with this soul stuff." "That is what I fear," she said, her voice tinged with an emotion Michael hadn't heard from her before, worry. "That you will be judged as something less. Something you are not." Michael met her gaze, his resolve hardening. "I'm not going to let them tear me apart. Not for doing the right thing." Talia seemed to consider this, her eyes thoughtful. "Perhaps," she murmured, "but you will not be alone. Whatever happens, you will face this trial with me by your side." Michael's chest tightened. He had come to care for her in a way he hadn't expected. The bond between them had formed quickly, and he realized then how much he had come to rely on her strength, even in her weakened state. The transport continued its journey through the stars, and Michael was left with little more than his thoughts and the silent promise that he would face whatever came next. He didn't know if he would survive the trial, but he knew one thing for certain, he wouldn't back down. As the ship began to slow, the soft hum of the engines fading into a quiet rhythm, Michael's thoughts shifted to the unknown world they were about to land on. He didn't know what awaited him there, but as he looked at Talia one last time, he knew that whatever happened, he wouldn't face it alone. The transport finally slowed to a stop, and Michael could feel the shift in the air around him. They had arrived. Talia had remained silent beside him, her face a mix of quiet determination and uncertainty. He could sense the weight of the moment on her, just as he felt the crushing pressure on himself. He had no idea what awaited them on this alien world, but he knew one thing, it was beyond anything he had ever faced before. The doors to the transport hissed open, revealing a vast, alien landscape. The ground was a strange mix of rough stone and soft, glowing grass that shimmered under the faint light of two moons in the sky. It felt like a world out of a dream, yet the reality of the situation pressed in on him. The air was thick with the scent of unfamiliar plants, their fragrance almost intoxicating. Michael stepped out first, his boots sinking slightly into the soft earth. The ground felt oddly alive beneath his feet, almost as if the planet itself was watching them. Talia followed behind, her movements still slow and cautious. Despite her strength, he could see that she was still weak from the ordeal by the river. They were met by a group of alien guards, their faces stern and unyielding. They wore intricate armor, unlike anything Michael had ever seen, with silver accents that glinted in the soft light of the moons. The leader of the group stepped forward, his gaze shifting between Michael and Talia. "You will follow us," he said in a voice that held no warmth, no room for negotiation. Michael nodded, his jaw clenched. He had no choice but to comply. As they moved forward, Michael couldn't help but glance around. The landscape was both beautiful and intimidating. Massive stone structures loomed in the distance, their designs complex and otherworldly. The air was still, save for the soft rustling of alien plants and the occasional distant sound of what might have been animals. They walked in silence, the tension thick around them. Michael's mind raced. What kind of trial awaited him here? Would he be able to stand his ground, or would he fail? He had no answers, only the weight of his promise to Talia. The path ahead seemed to stretch on forever, winding through strange, luminescent trees that seemed to pulse with life. Michael couldn't help but wonder if this place had always been this way or if it had been shaped by the beings who lived here. The guards led them to the base of a towering structure, its walls covered in intricate symbols and alien writing that Michael couldn't decipher. The air here felt heavier, as if the building itself held centuries of secrets. They were brought inside, where the atmosphere shifted once again. The walls were smooth, reflective, and cold to the touch. It was a place of judgment, he realized. A place where decisions were made, and lives were altered forever. As they approached a large chamber at the center of the building, Michael's heart began to race. There, standing in the middle of the room, was a council of alien leaders, their eyes glowing with a strange intensity. They looked at him, their gaze sharp and penetrating, as if they were searching for something deep inside him. Talia stepped forward, her eyes meeting Michael's briefly. She gave him a small nod, a silent encouragement. Michael took a deep breath and stepped into the chamber, ready to face whatever awaited him. He had no idea what the trial would entail, but he knew one thing, he would face it with courage. For Talia, and for the chance to prove that a human could stand tall in the face of the unknown. The chamber was silent as Michael stood before the council of alien leaders. Their eyes glowed, their expressions unreadable, and for a moment, he felt as though he was standing before a force far beyond anything he had ever encountered. The weight of their judgment pressed down on him, but he refused to show any sign of weakness. He stood tall, his posture straight, his jaw clenched in determination. Talia stood beside him, her presence a silent reminder of the promise he had made. He was doing this for her. The leader of the council, a tall alien with dark, almost obsidian skin, stepped forward. His eyes, glowing with an eerie light, never left Michael. Human, the alien's voice was deep and commanding, echoing in the large chamber. You have been chosen to stand trial in place of the one who owes us her life. Your actions are unprecedented. We do not know why you have intervened, but you will face the consequences of your choices. Michael's heart pounded in his chest, but he refused to be intimidated. I did what anyone would have done, he said, his voice steady, though the words felt strange coming from him. He wasn't used to speaking this way, not in front of so many powerful beings. I saved her. No one should have to die alone. The alien leader tilted his head slightly, as though considering Michael's words. The rest of the council remained silent, their eyes still trained on him. Finally, the leader spoke again. You have made a choice, and now you will prove yourself worthy of it. The trial will begin. The atmosphere in the room shifted, and Michael felt a chill run down his spine. He had no idea what kind of trial he was about to face, but he knew it wouldn't be easy. The council member raised his hand, and the walls of the chamber seemed to shimmer, revealing a strange, holographic representation of an alien landscape. The image was so vivid that it almost felt like he was standing in the place itself. The air smelled of something unfamiliar, and the ground beneath his feet seemed to tremble slightly, as though the planet itself was alive. You will traverse this world, the leader continued, and prove your worth through survival. If you can endure what this world offers, you will be granted your freedom. But if you fail, he let the words hang in the air, the weight of the unspoken threat more chilling than any words could have conveyed. Michael's mind raced. What did survival mean here? What kind of trial awaited him? But there was no time to ask questions. Before he could speak, the alien leader gestured toward the holographic landscape. You have 1 hour, he said. Step forward and face your fate. Michael took a deep breath, glancing at Talia once more. She gave him a small nod, her expression unreadable, but her eyes were filled with something, hope, perhaps, or maybe something deeper. He couldn't tell. But he knew he couldn't back down. He had made a promise, and he was going to keep it. With a steady step, he moved toward the projection, the weight of the trial settling on his shoulders. The moment he crossed the threshold, the world around him seemed to change. The air grew warmer, the ground beneath his feet shifting, as if he was being transported to another world entirely. He didn't know what awaited him, but he was ready. For Talia, for himself, and for whatever came next. He stepped forward into the unknown, determined to face whatever challenge lay ahead. The moment Michael stepped into the holographic landscape, the world around him seemed to shift entirely. The warm air filled his lungs, and the ground beneath him felt soft, almost sponge-like, with each step he took. The landscape stretched out before him, vast and alien, with towering cliffs and rolling hills covered in strange, bioluminescent plants that pulsed gently with light. The sky overhead was a deep shade of purple, with 2 moons hanging low, casting an eerie glow over everything. There were no sounds of wind or birds, only a strange hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. It was as if the very planet was alive, breathing with him. He paused for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest as he took in his surroundings. He didn't know what the trial would entail, but he knew it would test him in ways he couldn't predict. He could feel the weight of the council's judgment looming over him. Talia's words echoed in his mind, a test of his soul, of who he was at his core. Michael clenched his fists, trying to steady himself. He wasn't going to let fear control him. He had made a promise to Talia, and he was going to see it through. He began walking, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of danger or direction. There was nothing, just the endless expanse of alien terrain. The ground seemed to shift beneath him, the bioluminescent plants lighting his way in an almost rhythmic pattern. As he moved, the landscape seemed to change, the colors shifting from soft blues and purples to bright greens and yellows. It was beautiful, but unnerving. Every step he took felt like it was leading him deeper into the unknown. After what felt like hours, Michael noticed something in the distance, a small clearing surrounded by thick trees with bark that shimmered like silver. In the center of the clearing stood a stone pedestal, covered in glowing symbols. He approached cautiously, his instincts on high alert. As he neared the pedestal, the symbols began to pulse with a soft, rhythmic light. Michael hesitated, his hand reaching for his sidearm out of habit, but he quickly reminded himself that this wasn't a battle. This was a test of his will. His fingers brushed against the pedestal, and the symbols flared brightly, as if responding to his touch. Suddenly, the ground beneath him trembled, and the air seemed to hum with energy. Michael stumbled back, his heart racing. He wasn't sure what was happening, but he knew it wasn't good. From the shadows at the edge of the clearing, strange figures began to emerge. They were tall, their bodies cloaked in shimmering fabric that seemed to blend with the environment. Their faces were obscured, but their eyes glowed with the same eerie light as the symbols on the pedestal. Michael's breath caught in his throat. He had no idea what these beings were, but they were not of this world. The figures moved toward him, their steps soundless, as if they were part of the landscape itself. Michael instinctively took a step back, but the figures closed in on him, their eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. One of them raised a hand, and the symbols on the pedestal flared again, brighter than before. The light surrounded Michael, and he felt a rush of energy surge through him. It was like nothing he had ever experienced. His body felt lighter, almost weightless, as if the energy of the planet was flowing through him. "What is this?" he gasped, his voice barely a whisper. The figure that had raised its hand spoke, its voice a low, melodic hum. "This is the trial. Your worth will be determined by your ability to endure the energy of this world, to prove that you are worthy of the life you've been given. Endure, human, and you will be free. Fail, and you will be lost to the planet's will." Michael swallowed hard, his mind racing. He didn't know how to endure this, how to prove himself. But one thing was clear, there was no turning back now. He had to face this trial, no matter what it took. With a deep breath, he stood tall, ready to confront whatever the world, whatever the trial, had in store for him. The energy coursing through Michael's body intensified, a powerful current that made every muscle in his body ache. The figures surrounding him remained still, watching with glowing eyes as the symbols on the pedestal pulsated, their light washing over him like waves crashing on a shore. His vision blurred, the world around him shifting as if he were standing at the edge of a dream. Michael clenched his fists, fighting the overwhelming sensation that threatened to take control. He had to hold on. He wasn't going to let this strange world break him. The air grew heavier, and a low hum began to vibrate through the ground, resonating deep within his bones. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. "Endure," the voice of the figure echoed in his mind, its tone both soothing and commanding. "Prove your worth." Michael gritted his teeth, his body trembling under the weight of the trial. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his breath coming in shallow gasps as the energy of the planet surged through him. It was like nothing he had ever felt before, raw, untamed, and all-encompassing. He couldn't escape it, but he didn't want to. The sensation was both terrifying and exhilarating, as if he were becoming one with the world around him. He could feel the life force of the planet pulsing through the air, the energy of its very existence coursing through his veins. And yet, amid all the power, there was a strange calm that settled within him. It wasn't just the energy that was being tested, it was his resolve. He realized then that the trial wasn't just about surviving the physical sensations. It was about his will, his determination to hold on to who he was, despite the overwhelming force around him. He could feel the planet pushing against him, testing his limits, but he refused to give in. He had promised Talia that he would stand strong, and he was not going to break now. The figures around him remained silent, their eyes never leaving him, their expressions unreadable. He felt their presence, as if they were waiting for him to falter, to give in to the pressure. But Michael held firm. He wasn't going to let them see him fall. The energy intensified again, a sharp jolt that sent a wave of pain through his body, but he did not move. He focused on his breath, on the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, blocking out the overwhelming sensations that threatened to drown him. "You are strong," the voice spoke again, this time clearer, more defined. "But strength alone will not be enough." Michael's eyes snapped open, his mind sharp and focused. He could feel the energy waning slightly, but it wasn't over. He knew it wasn't over. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm of sensations tearing at him. The figure did not answer directly, but the energy shifted once again, the world around him growing darker, more intense. The hum of the planet's life force deepened, resonating through his body. The trial was far from over. But for the first time since he had stepped into this alien world, Michael understood something important. The trial wasn't just about enduring what was in front of him, it was about enduring whatever came next, no matter how impossible it seemed. He wasn't just fighting for survival, he was fighting for something far greater. With that realization, Michael's resolve solidified. He would endure. He would face whatever came next. He was ready. The world around Michael began to shift again, the energy still coursing through his body, but now, it felt different. The intensity of the trial had dulled, but the weight of the atmosphere grew heavier. It was as if the very air had thickened, pressing down on him, making it harder to breathe, harder to move. The ground beneath his feet felt solid, yet the sensation still vibrated through his bones, keeping him tethered to the unknown. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. This trial, whatever it was far from over. His mind raced with questions. What was it that he had to prove? What did he have to endure to pass this trial? The voice of the figure from earlier echoed in his mind, clear and calm. "Strength is not enough," it said. "You must show that you are more than just your body. Show that your mind is as strong as your will." Michael's grip tightened on the stone pedestal, the energy pulsing once more, almost as if the planet itself was testing his resolve. He had been pushed to the edge physically, but now it was his mind that had to rise to the challenge. His thoughts drifted to Talia, to the promise he had made her. He couldn't fail now. He couldn't allow himself to be overwhelmed by the weight of the unknown. He wasn't just fighting for survival, he was fighting for something far greater. His fingers dug into the pedestal, his knuckles white as he closed his eyes, focusing. The energy surged around him, but instead of resisting it, Michael began to relax, allowing it to flow through him. It was like the tension in his body began to melt away, replaced by something else, something more profound. His mind began to clear, and with it, he found a new sense of purpose. It wasn't about brute strength. It wasn't about forcing his way through the trial. It was about accepting it, embracing the challenge, and using his mind to navigate it. As the energy continued to swirl around him, Michael opened his eyes. The holographic landscape had shifted once more, and now, he found himself standing on a cliff's edge, overlooking a vast expanse. Below, he could see a deep chasm, the sides of which were lined with towering, jagged rocks. The air was thick with mist, and the only sound was the distant echo of water crashing somewhere far below. The path ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, with no clear direction. Michael didn't know what awaited him, but he knew this was the next step in the trial. The figures that had been watching him earlier appeared once more, standing at the edge of the chasm, their eyes glowing with intensity. They said nothing but watched him, their silent presence heavy. Michael took another deep breath, feeling the energy still coursing through him, now more focused than before. He stepped forward, his mind clear, his body ready. The trial had no clear path, no simple solution. It was about proving who he was, proving that he could endure whatever was thrown his way. Without hesitation, Michael moved toward the chasm, his steps sure and steady. The path ahead was uncertain, but he was no longer afraid. The trial was about to reveal something deeper, about his strength, about his ability to endure. And whatever came next, Michael was ready. The chasm stretched before him, the jagged rocks below almost appearing to reach out as if waiting for him to step off the edge. Michael hesitated for only a moment, taking in the vast expanse beneath him. His body still felt the effects of the trial's energy, but now it was different, focused. He wasn't just fighting his surroundings or the unknown force pulling at him, he was fighting for clarity, for understanding. He had to find the way forward, but there was no map, no guide. The path was his to carve. Michael stepped closer to the edge, his heart pounding, but he forced his thoughts to slow, allowing his body to take over. He had already crossed one obstacle. This, whatever this was, wouldn't be the end. His eyes scanned the horizon, looking for something, anything, that might offer him direction. The mist swirling around the chasm seemed to deepen with each passing second, but in the distance, something caught his eye. A glimmer. A faint glow rising from the base of the cliffs. Michael narrowed his eyes, knowing this was the way. Without hesitation, he moved, his footsteps now more confident than ever. The ground beneath him was firm, solid, yet the mist swirled and thickened around him as if trying to pull him into its depths. The world had quieted, the hum of the trial fading to a distant murmur. The air was thick with an unfamiliar pressure. Michael took another step, then another, feeling each movement take him closer to the unknown. The glow he had seen in the distance grew brighter, clearer. It wasn't just light, it was an energy, a pulse that seemed to resonate with his very core. It called to him, pulling him toward it. As he moved forward, the figures that had watched him from the shadows of the landscape appeared again. They stood in perfect silence, their glowing eyes following his every step. Michael's chest tightened, but his resolve only grew stronger. He wasn't sure what these beings wanted, or if they had any control over his fate, but he would not falter. He had come too far to turn back now. His gaze never left the glowing light in the distance, and the closer he got, the more he could feel the trial shifting, changing. It wasn't just about his physical endurance anymore. It was about understanding the purpose of this trial, understanding the energy he had felt coursing through him, and learning what it truly meant to endure. He had to face himself. With every step, the world around him began to shift, the path now lined with ancient, glowing symbols that pulsed beneath his feet. The energy surged through him once again, this time calming, almost soothing. He wasn't sure how long he had been walking, but as the light grew brighter, the figures surrounding him faded into the background, their presence still felt but no longer threatening. Finally, he reached the source of the glow, standing before an ancient stone structure, its surface etched with intricate designs. The air felt charged, alive with energy. Michael stepped forward, his fingers brushing the cool surface of the stone. The moment he touched it, the world around him seemed to dissolve. The energy, once overwhelming, now flowed through him in waves, each one more intense than the last. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded, and the stone became still. Michael stood there, his breath shallow, his heart racing. Had he passed the trial? Had he succeeded? He didn't know, but he felt different, as if something deep inside him had shifted, changed. And then, from the shadows, Talia appeared. Her eyes locked with his, and for a moment, there was nothing else in the world. She had been watching him all along. She knew. The silence between them was filled with understanding. Michael had endured, and in doing so, he had proven himself. He had completed the trial, not just for her, but for himself. And whatever came next, he was ready.